Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Heartland Mamas. I'm Murray Briel.
And I'm Heidi Henry, coming to you from three separate studios at the edge of the Great Red Divide and one studio in the complete blue zone. Today, you can find all of our previous episodes at Heartland Mamas, MAMAS.com, on all podcast platforms, and proudly carried on the Demcast USA network. Today, Murray, we've got a really touchy subject that we need to address again, and we've brought with us or into our studios today Marc Sims, who is a podcaster. He's the host of Just a Few Questions. You may know him from when he did public access television. That's how long Mark has been in broadcasting. So, Mark, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then Murray's going to introduce our topic for today.
A little bit. No one remembers my little public access show. I was. Let me drop a name. I was interviewing Gary Meyer on my. People know Gary Meyer of a certain age. Gary Meyer from the Great Stephen Gary Show and his old shows and other shows. And so, I do a podcast. It goes all over the highway. It's like my public access show. Some people remember the old show because I started like in 1991
Mm-hmm.
because I had delusions of being a celebrity, Murray, Heidi. I had delusions of grandeur, but it didn't work out, which is cool because I would have been divorced and my kids would have hated me and I'd have been on drugs. So it's okay.
Oh,
The
man.
podcast is fun. Everybody should do one or be my
Yes.
guest.
Yes. Okay, so Murray, go
So,
ahead.
Mark, we've talked to you a couple of times and we've been on your show. Thank you so much for having us,
Well,
and
you
everyone
got to
should
come
listen.
back.
Mark's show. Oh, we will, we will. But one of the things that we talk about a lot, we've addressed redlining, and today we really want to talk about income inequality and what we are facing as far as an educational gap, a geographic gap, a technological gap, and what Mark thinks we can do to help sort of make that better. So, Mark, when we were talking in our pre-show, we were talking about the income inequality, and we started to mention a little bit about education, and the gap in education is a part of income inequality. That kind of sums up a little bit of what we were talking about, correct?
Yeah, yeah, but I'm not an expert, but I'm living income inequality. That's my only expertise. You have all the
Oh,
facts and figures. I'm feeling it every day.
we all are, Mark. I don't
No, no,
know
but
too many
but
people who
Murray and
aren't.
Heidi, half of Americans are doing just fine. At least half. They're working from home. They haven't lost their income.
Yeah.
The really super rich like Jeff Bezos, he's still making a ton of money. But I think it's the other half, if you will, maybe 40%, who are really just taking it hard.
Hard.
It's really tough.
This K-shaped economy, Mark, has been devastating for people at the bottom, on the bottom half of that K. And we see it in our community. Murray sees it in her community. You see it in your community every day. I work at several food banks. I see the lines. We supply eggs to our local small town food bank, and the dozens that I bring go so quickly because there's no proteins for people. And I remember, you and I, Mark, are old enough to remember when we didn't need food banks, when we had very few
Well, no,
homeless
no, no, no.
shelters.
Wait, wait. I'm between you and Heidi, so I don't tell your age. So so we're right around the same age.
Yeah, yeah.
Keep going.
Well,
AIDS. People starving.
I remember when I was a kid that, like the Wayside Cross down in the Loop, that was one of the few places where people went when they were homeless and hungry. Now, almost every city has a micro pantry or a food pantry or a homeless shelter because we can't survive without them, even here in rural Illinois. And you live in Chicago, and I'm sure that you see it in your own neighborhood. I mean, we see it out here in our neighborhoods. And the problem with the inequality is that it impacts things like education, it impacts violence, and it impacts neglect, addiction. I interviewed J.B. Pritzker, our governor, for Indivisible before, like the day after he declared. And I went right after him with the minimum wage 15, fight for 15 question. And he gave me such a good dissertation on poverty. I was gobsmacked. I was so impressed that he understood that when people don't earn a living wage, that they are more likely to be in abusive situations. They are more likely to have food and housing insecurity, that they are likely to be addicted to something, gambling, um, alcohol, drugs. They are less likely to stay in the same place over and over again. 78% of people that move in that are in poverty move out before the end of the school year if they have children. So, talking about that, I want you to tell me about how income insecurity affects you and the people around you.
Uh, See, I mean, I don't know about where you guys live, but we've always had poor people. I mean, can you imagine? As we well know, the greatness the modern greatness of the United States is after the Second World War.
Yeah.
I watched a lot of PBS because I got rid of cable because I couldn't afford it. And so watched the Roosevelts. I was watching the Roosevelts the other day. Ken Burns' great documentary.
Great.
And
Yeah.
folks had it hard.
Yeah.
And then we had the Great Depression, and then we had the New Deal
Yep.
in the Second World War. And the greatest as we've known is after the Second World War.
Right.
People forget we weren't. I wasn't. You weren't around where y'all ladies now. Y'all weren't around, right? I wasn't around, and so even being growing up in the '60s, I didn't realize that the war ended like maybe 20 years ago. You don't really think about these things. I mean, I had a high school teacher, and please, when I start babbling, you have to stop me, ladies. But I had a high school teacher in high school in the '70s, and she was talking about the war. But as a kid, I didn't realize the war wasn't that long ago. It was like 30 years ago or something, right?
Right.
So Americans have been really spoiled. So it's always been poor people. It is nothing new. The problem now is that the gap has gone really, really wide. I think we had that problem in the United States in the 20s.
Yeah.
Then we had a Great Depression.
Right.
And we had a Second World War.
Right.
And I hope history doesn't rhyme. I really don't, but we'll see. So I mean, I see it, but you just deal with it. I mean, it's like I wish I can, because I get to babbling, I can't remember the theme songs are like Good Times, right? Keeping your head above water,
Right.
making a wave. You can't, So go look at the Good Times theme song,
Love
and
Good
so
Times, yeah.
people just used to the old TV show Get Good Times theme song, and you just used to this is how it is.
Right.
But there's also people who've always had it good, and it's gonna be okay. But most Americans, I mean, I don't know about your children, maybe my children, they're not going to do as well as their parents. They're going to adjust. It's the way it is, and it may take a generation of fighting politically and socially to even out some of this income inequality.
Well, Mark, in pre-show we talked about how I came of age under Ronald Reagan, and watching, 50 years, and granted that was before my time. About 1965 is when we started these drastic tax cuts to the rich, and kept dropping the income tax rate down for them, the profit taxes down for them and for businesses, because it was supposed to ostensibly stimulate the economy down, trickle down. And it never has. Trickle down has never worked. And instead, we see this wealth gap. We have Jeff Bezos on one hand, and then we have everybody else. 98% of people. And like you said, 40% of people are really doing poorly right now, really struggling with food insecurity, really struggling with housing insecurity. And we don't always think about the fact that our economy really starts at that level. Our economy, in my opinion, starts at the lowest level. And I think, I always call myself an FDR Democrat, a New Deal Democrat. And our economy starts at that level. And I think that's something FDR saw when he was framing the Great Society, that we have to have a point where everybody can rise from, or none of us rise. We all have to kind of rise together. If you give everybody a platform and they screw it up, then it's on them. But make sure that the social safety nets, the things that are there that people can rise from. That's my opinion on
That brings
FDR.
us right now to what's going on in the state of Illinois. Pritzker released his new budget cuts,
Yeah.
where it was $71 million in funding in order to try to make some ends meet. And of course, the Republicans pushed back. But what I found really interesting is one of the first places that he's going to make cuts is in the state prison system. We have about 16,000 less prisoners in state custody
Right.
than we did 5, 6 years ago. So we have facilities that are maybe not functioning in the best way possible. We have additional facilities. But what I found really interesting was the average cost to maintain a state prisoner is $23,000 a year with salaries and benefits together. It costs the state about $37,000 a year to have someone incarcerated in the
Right.
state prison system. And I thought to myself, knowing that we were doing our show today, Mark, and having you on, I thought, how interesting if the state gave nonviolent offenders um, $20,000 a year to live on. You would save $15,000 a year in prisoner costs, and $20,000 would be some income security to allow those folks to go on and to go to school, to get an apartment with a stable address where they might be able to look for a job to further and better themselves. So it would cost us that much less alone if we just reorganized our priorities. And I was wondering what you think about that, Mark.
I think you should run for president of the United States, or maybe governor of Illinois. Murray, you
I
have
just
to run. You
think
have to do this.
I'm not a
You can be
politician,
JB. JB
but
has billions, but you can beat him.
it
No, all
does
jokes
make
aside,
sense.
no, it's true. I really believe in some sort of not so much like Andrew Yang's universal basic income,
Mm-hmm.
but really a targeted universal basic income. Me, Marc Sims. I mean, personally, I think I mentioned this earlier on the show earlier this year. I worked for 29 years up until this pandemic, and I got because I'm in the hospitality business. I got knocked out because of the pandemic, and I've never taken unemployment. Never. I would just go get another job, you know.
Me too.
And but this time with the pandemic, I was like, okay, this is serious, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I took government money,
Yeah.
and government money saved my freaking behind. And so I believe in some targeted universal basic income. You people, we need a stronger social safety net. This is real. And if I didn't get the government money, thank you, government people and taxpayers. I love you because you know I was able to survive because of your money. And if I didn't, I would have to go sell drugs and commit crimes. And they have carjackings in Chicago, left and right. I understand because people have to survive. But
Yeah.
that, to your point, Murray, I was someone on a nice person on social media sent me something called the $1 million blocks. I wasn't even hip to the $1 million blocks, meaning that the state, the city, the government, people make money off of poor people going to jail. And they call them
Yes,
million
they
dollar
do.
blocks. When you send
Oh,
somebody to jail, it's like $1 million to send them to
industry.
jail.
Yeah, the
So I mean,
prison industry
yes.
is a ridiculously corrupt capitalistic product. That is all it is.
Yep.
And we've done a couple of shows on that, Mark. So 100% we understand that.
People should look that up. Just look up $1 million blocks. You'll see an
I will.
NPR report. You see some other stuff. It's amazing. You know this stuff, and prisons are traded on the stock exchange. But people make money off of people going to prison. That's just how it is. And so
Yes.
hopefully we will get to some sort of targeted universal basic income. I mean, it would be a basic income, but people need a little money, and that little money will keep
Yes.
them from starving or committing crimes or getting hooked on meth or cocaine or drinking too much. So
You gotta
but
escape
the
one
thing about
way.
it, we have to demand it, and we have to explain it to people. It's better to do this than locking people up.
Right. And it would save money. It would be cost effective. And Republicans are all about saving money. It would cost us less to give them $1,000 a month, $12,000 a year to, along with other programs, it would save an exponential amount of money. And they're becoming productive members of society.
Yeah.
And they have an opportunity to better their community, which they would, which is so infuriating to me that we can't be smarter about shit. It's
So
just dumb.
so
But it's because of capitalism, Mark.
Yes,
because
capitalism.
yeah, because when Roosevelt was starting to reframe our society, instead of doing debtors' prisons, he promoted the Civilian Conservation Corps and the Work Progress Administration. So putting poor people to work and having them not just work, but having them work at a decent wage that included housing and food so that they could send their paycheck home to their families so their families would not dissolve. You remember those pictures of people selling their children because they couldn't afford to feed them. And we're kind of back at that same place. Either we need to employ people or we need to make sure that they can survive until they can find employment. I know nonviolent offenders that are in prison right now that 8 years out of a young man's life for a reckless homicide. It was a DUI issue. Yeah, he did a bad thing. He did a terrible thing. I'd rather him be out there in the forest preserves planting trees and cutting down logs and taking up time at $37,000 a year all over the state and not finishing his education and not getting any rehabilitation for his problem. But here we are. And this is one kid that I know. How many others are out there? There has
Thousands.
to thousands,
Why
tens
won't
of
we,
thousands.
Heidi?
Huh?
Money, money, money,
Well, and Murray,
money.
to your point on the
Quote
governor's
Pink Floyd.
cuts, the reason he
Exactly.
got
But
pushback from the
we say that's
Republican
Pink
Party,
Floyd. That's not.
he got pushback from the Republican Party because of the for-profit prison systems that donate to Republican coffers. And you know that as well as I do. You know that that was the impetus for that pushback.
Yes,
We,
ma'am.
yeah, we let a lot of prisoners out when we reformed things for marijuana convictions, and we should let more out. And instead of the drug addicts should go and have therapy and have cures and have a possibility of a life instead of being imprisoned. And yet we fill these prison systems because it's, like you said, Mark, $1 million blocks.
They make a ton of money. Just ask me another question because I got stuff written down, but
Okay,
I,
Murray,
I
go
have to
ahead.
shut my mouth and let you talk.
No, I think that you really made valid points there, Mark, and I gotta agree with you 100%. And I think that income, inequality isn't going to be addressed because we do face the ultimate cycle. It was funny because right now we're talking a lot about perhaps forgiving student loan debt. And there's a lot of
Pushback.
spiciness on both sides
Oh,
of
I
it.
push back
Because
on
like
that issue. I push back.
I paid my student loan. It took, my Steve paid his. And people think, well, what about me? And so I don't think it should be a what about me. And I do think that there should be some relief, particularly for those folks who were sold a bill of sales. And it was my son and I have been talking about the education system a lot because he's in a rhetoric class. And one of the things I found very interesting was there was a tweet yesterday, and I can't remember who it was by or the exact content, but the gist of it was college is one of the greatest scams of all time. Rich people convince you need to go spend money to make rich people more money. You get a college
Oh
degree so you can go work for rich
no.
people and make rich people
See
more money.
the college thing is very simple, and we talked about this before. I think when I came out of school in 19 high school in 1980, I think maybe about 20% of the country had a 4-year degree. It's maybe 30 now. It's probably going to cap at 30 because of the cost. And in places like Illinois, there are fewer children who have the money to go to college.
Right.
And with the pandemic, there'll be fewer children being born
Right.
because of the pandemic and the economic
Well, I don't
collapse.
know.
Where you're
People
gonna
are
have fewer
home.
children. Well, that's what I hear. Well, I don't know what y'all doing, but the
Too old.
point is that so it's going to cap. So my thing is that somebody has to go to college
Right.
because we need a professional class. But something I should have done, and you're going to have to do some post-secondary education, maybe at a community college. So somebody has to go to school. But here's the problem. Let me just go far afield about this education because I have to talk about my little podcast. I had Emily Hanford on the show. Emily Hanford is just phenomenal reporter from American Public Media Reports. She's been doing reports for like 3 or 4 years, talking about reporting on the science of reading. The science of reading is nothing new, and I can't explain it, but it's really about phonics and implicit phonics instruction.
Right.
But the premise is that 40% of the kids can read very well, no matter how you teach them.
Right.
But the other 60% are going to struggle.
Right.
Dyslexia or whatever, or they were just a hard head like I was back in the day, and they need more instruction. and they don't get it. And then you have people going to college, let's say the local community college, and they have to do remedial classes.
Right.
And some people never get out of the remedial classes. So we have a lot of Americans who are undertrained, undereducated. You have a
Right.
lot of jobs that can't be filled because people
And
like me
you
don't
know,
have the education.
Mark, you are 100% right. And here's something you might find interesting. Our entire education system was designed by Thomas Jefferson. He took the Peruvian education system and decided that that would be not, yeah, Parisian
Parisian.
education system.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, not Peruvian, Parisian, because he thought that that would be a great example to use as we build our nation. And the fun part about it is that the Parisian education system and all education systems from that portion of the world were specifically designed to create consumers and control the proletariat. So that is they create a consumer class and keep the consumer class needing to stay in that class in order to keep them working to raise more money for the capitalists without educate. So the education system is kind of like a track system in Germany, but we don't call it that. Lower economic areas with lower income, right? They face teachers who have less ability to work with kids. And you're absolutely right. 60% of people learn differently than what the standard class is. And the whole institution itself creates this competitive capitalistic idea. So if I'm a kid and I maybe have dyslexia or I have ADHD, which disenfranchises kids who are in a lower economic socio class because their parents don't realize or get them help or they're not diagnosed earlier. But it also creates the school to prison pipeline, particularly for Black and brown boys who have ADHD, because it goes undiagnosed twice as often in that community. So these kids go to vocational classes, they go to the lower classes, and teachers are given a lot less material to work with and are told these kids need to learn how to follow directions, follow authority, and so they can go into being worker bees. And you're right, only 40% are even looked at as being worthy of carrying on into potentially getting higher up. It's a really interesting. I think you're 100% right. We designed this system. We put this system in place in our nation. Why? We could have done any system in the world, and yes, the world was smaller, but we could have improved on it, but we didn't. And who were our founding fathers? They were capitalists, they were slave owners. They wanted to create those workers to keep churning for them. My diatribe for the day. Sorry, Mark.
Murray's got a soapbox.
Hey, hey, hey.
Yay! It was very good, Murray.
Oh, Heidi, go ahead. I
Well,
could talk forever.
I know, me too. But I was just thinking that we have the ability and the wherewithal to change in front of us. We did make seismic changes under FDR. We made seismic changes, paradigm shift with the New Deal. This is why all across out in my area where we have these rundown small towns everywhere with empty storefronts. You just go through a whole line of Main Street with very little in them, except bars. And on the sides of the building, they paint these grandiose scenes of the 50s and 60s. And they paint those because that's when things were working right. That's when things were working for most everybody. There needed to be more inclusion in the New Deal. However, instead of thinking about how we get there again, these small towns, which are largely red, think about how do we stay in that status quo. They don't think about going forward, or they shame people for being poor. That's a shameful thing to have debt. That's a shameful thing. And we talked a little bit in pre-show about how 71% of suicides are white males, and the reason that is because we forgot that when Reagan changed our tax structure and said that everybody could pool themselves up by their bootstraps, he removed the bootstraps from everyone. In fact, he took the shoes off a lot of people. There's no way to pull yourself up that way. And mercantilism, mercenary capitalism, is the core value for the Republican Party, for the Bohemia Club, for, I would say, even the Lincoln Project, because that is how they see this country moving forward, instead of a vision where we can have people rise from and create the new society again. But we have to make sure that we put the protections in place, that we can't rob from the poor to pay the rich any longer. And we have that opportunity right now, but do we have the guts to do it?
And that will start when corporations start being forced to pay their fair share. But that's a topic for a completely other day. But we would
you
love
say
to have
that,
you back.
Heidi and Murray, you say that, and we had a state that could pass, what was it called? The fair tax.
Yeah.
We couldn't even pass the fair tax. Now here in Chicago, I'm on the far south side. We voted for a fair tax. And other people outside of places like Chicago, not everybody,
down in my
they
neck of the
voted with
woods.
the Ken Griffins. They voted with the rich people.
I
It's
know.
insanity.
Okay,
Can I explain why, Mark?
I know it's your show, but explain to me, since y'all out there a little bit further than I am. I live in the city. Why do people, not everybody voted like this? How come we couldn't vote for a fair tax to tax the rich a little bit more?
Mark.
Why?
I know exactly why.
Okay, go ahead, Murray.
Tell you exactly why. Because we vastly overestimate the intelligence of the American population. Because most of the American population is spoon-fed. Yes, they have no ability to. They have no interest in questioning anything because they're spoon-fed in school. They're the same product, less critical thinking, more rote answers, get a good grade, get a better job. There's nothing to engage kids like we just talked about. And when you're not learning when you're spoon-fed and you're content with that, you lose the ability to critically analyze anything. And in addition, we are just really stupid. There's a lot of stupid people out there.
Murray can explain it that way, but let me explain it how I lived it, because I live in one of those. Murray lives in a more blue area, far more blue area than I do. I live in an area where it went red except for 2 races in my county. Our state representative, who was funded by the local operating engineer 150, and our state's attorney, because our old state's attorney was such a screw up. We finally got a new state's attorney that was Democrat. The reason fair tax failed out here, number one, there's a hatred for the Democratic Party, especially Mike Madigan out here, like you wouldn't believe. And I have tried to engage people who have Pritzker sucks signs in their front yard and say, can you come on my podcast and tell me why you think he sucks? Because they really don't know. They just hate him because he's a Democrat, seriously, and because of Madigan. But out here, I have one neighbor that told me, now he's 64 years old. He makes about $68,000 a year. And he told me that he can't vote for fair tax because one day he's going to be in that over $250,000 income bracket. That's not
well, it was also messaging.
Oh,
that was a really big problem, and the pandemic and everything and not having a strong enough relationship with the House and the Senate, Pritzker, because they should have had their folks out there, helping to push that narrative. And they didn't. So I think there's a lot of reasons why it didn't. But I'm going to stick with my answer of people are stupid.
Well, if people don't understand.
Merry Christmas! People are dumb.
People don't understand the difference between making $64,000 a year and making $250,000 a year, at least out here by me. They think it's all the same, and it's not. And I can, but.
No, I've met a few billionaires. I think, and I know you probably met a few billionaires. Mm-hmm. $1 billion is a lot of money.
It is.
Then you meet some people who are half billionaires. People don't understand, and I have trouble just understanding somebody who's worth $500 million.
It's a lot of money.
I met a few people like that, but it's like that's more money than you can ever spend. You know what I'm saying?
I can buy horses really with that. So.
I don't begrudge anybody who
right. I don't begrudge anybody their money, but pay your damn taxes.
I think people don't fully understand. Like, we're having this discussion. I've never met you ladies in person. And although we're all, blue voters and all that kind of stuff, I will talk to someone who's a red voter. I mean, a Republican voter.
Yeah.
Let's how far can we meet in the middle? Can we
Yeah.
understand this? And if you have some, what's the fancy term, cognitive dissonance, I really can't help you. If you're a thinking person, like, I mean, I like telling. I mean, it's not a story. When I was a limo driver, I drove Tucker Carlson a few times, right?
Mm-hmm.
Tucker Carlson from Fox News, who could be your president in 4 years. This is no joke.
No,
If
no,
Tom Cotton
no.
doesn't get the nomination, watch out. I would say Tom Cotton right now. Tom Cotton is from Harvard, although he's from Arkansas too. Man is 6'5". He's very so. But the point is that whether it's Tom Cotton or Tucker Carlson, we have to have this is time to have a sane discussion about the future of America. People need help, at least half the country. How do we help them? Yes, you have to get people have to get a decent education and be trained for certain jobs, but this AI and these algorithms are serious. They're very serious. And over time, like every recession, people lose their job. I'm in my late 50s and I've talked to people my age. I said, and they had good jobs.
Yeah.
And some of those jobs, they're gonna let them go. They say you're making 60,000, 80,000, 100,000,
Mm-hmm.
cut, they're
That's
gonna
it.
get rid of you. And so, like, and when I was reading the book, and I forgot the name of the book, it's called, I think it's called The Future is Faster Than You Think. And
Yes.
they talk about all this new technologies coming out. It's going to reshape, and the pandemic is doing it now. It's going to reshape education. It's going to reshape healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people will be cut. And guess what? If you have a job, you won't make as much money. And that's why we have to figure this out. You know,
Now.
we have anybody's grown children. Some of these millennials, I mean, some millennials in their 40s, but they like, wow, I didn't think it was gonna be this hard, but they don't understand the kind of economy we're in. And if you do make money, the burdens on you is that how are you going to help your family and other people? Because I met basketball players when I was a limo driver. I'm
Mm-hmm.
a famous basketball player. And I always wanted to ask them, but got to be professional. I say, when do you tell your family no?
Yeah.
I know I'm worth $300 million. I'm worth $1 billion, but I can't help everybody, right? But that's a burden you have to. I mean, some people feel guilty because they are the haves, and they have family members who are the have-nots, and you really can't help people. You can help them here and there, but in the long run, you have to teach all of us how to fish.
You know, Mark, I think
You
that's a
people
great.
fish, and you have to teach them how to fish at the same time.
Yeah. I think it's a great place to wrap up today. We'd love to have you back on again. We're going to release this along with.
Always wonderful talking with you,
Yes.
Mark.
But we
Absolutely.
Always.
we didn't solve the world's problem. We got to come back and
I
do this.
I
We
think
got to solve the problem.
yes. That you know what? So let's meet again next month and with our solutions. How about that, Mark?
But you got to come on back on my show first. Just a few
You
questions.
let
Just a
us
few
know when you
questions. You
want
got to
us
come on
on.
my show.
We would love to. All right.
Thanks, ladies.
Take care, Mark. We'll see you later.
Well, thanks again for coming on. That's Mark Sims on Just a Few Questions. You can find his podcast everywhere you get your favorite podcasts. He is an amazing friend of the show. So please, guys, check out Mark Sims. Check out Just a Few Questions. 15 minutes of your time, well worth it. And check us out for all of our previous episodes everywhere you get your favorite podcasts. YouTube, if you like to look at our silly faces. Argentina, we're number 25. Just saying that. Heartland Mamas,
MAMAS.com.
MAMS.
See you later, everybody. Take care. Bye bye.